Level 1, $800 a month. The room isn't yours. It has your bed, your clothes, your one shelf of books, but the walls belong to someone else. You pay rent on the first of every month, and by the fifth, you've already forgotten the receipt exists. Because a receipt for a room isn't proof of anything. It's just proof you paid to stay. Your landlord texts you about the dishwasher, not asking, informing. He's coming Thursday between 12 and 4, and you rearrange your entire day around a 4-hour window because his key opens your door, whether you're home or not. You don't own the walls, so you don't own the schedule either. You paint one wall a color you like, soft green, something that made the room feel like it belonged to you for exactly 6 weeks. Then the lease renewal email arrives with a clause about restoring the unit to its original condition. You spend a Saturday repainting it back to white, on your knees, rolling primer over a color you paid for with your own hands. Nobody sees this. Nobody claps. The wall goes back to looking like nobody lives there, because as far as the deed is concerned, nobody does. Rent goes up in March, $50 more. No negotiation, no explanation beyond market adjustment. You Google the phrase and learn it means whatever the landlord decides it means. You could leave, but leaving means first month, last month, and a deposit somewhere else. Money you don't have sitting still long enough to move it. So you stay and you pay the $50 and you tell yourself it's temporary, the way you've told yourself that for 2 years. You watch a pipe leak under the sink for 9 days before anyone fixes it. You call twice, you text once. The landlord says he's got a guy coming. The guy comes on day 9, tightens a fitting, leaves without looking at you. You mop up water in a bucket for over a week in an apartment that isn't yours, fixing a problem that isn't yours to fix, because waiting is the only leverage you have and you don't actually have any. The first rule, at $800 a month, you're not renting space, you're renting permission. And permission can be revoked, delayed, or priced higher anytime someone else decides to. Level 2, $1,400 a month. You've upgraded. A real one-bedroom this time, not a room with someone else's noise through the wall. The apartment feels like a step forward until you do the math on a Tuesday night and realize you've paid this landlord $33,600 over 2 years. 0 of it came back. Not $1. You mention this to a coworker who owns a condo. He nods like he understands, but he doesn't. Not really. Because his mortgage payment builds him something and yours builds someone else's someone. You ask about a longer lease, something with more security. The property manager says 2 years is possible, but the rent increases 4% annually, guaranteed, whether the market goes up or down. You do the math again. In year 5, you'll be paying $200 more a month for the exact same apartment, the exact same walls, the exact same view of the parking lot. Nothing will have changed except the number, and the number only moves one direction. Your friend group starts talking about buying. Not you, them. 2 of them close on a starter home the same month, a modest place 40 minutes out, and they post pictures of a backyard that's actually theirs. You like the post. You mean it. You also close the app and sit with something that isn't quite jealousy, something closer to arithmetic. You could theoretically save for a down payment, but rent takes 38% of your income before anything else moves, and what's left doesn't compound into anything. It just keeps you housed for another 30 days. The building gets sold in the fall. New owner, new management company, a letter under your door announcing a $150 increase effective in 60 days, no vote, no input, no say. You didn't do anything wrong. You just live somewhere someone else decided to buy. The second rule, at $1,400 a month, you're not building anything. You're renting the illusion of stability while someone else quietly builds equity out of your monthly proof of income. Level 3, $1,800 a month plus a car payment plus a growing sense that the math will never resolve itself. You're doing everything the way you were told to. Good credit, steady job, no late payments anywhere. And still, every time you check listings on your lunch break, the number required for a down payment moves further away than your savings account moves toward it. You run a mortgage calculator one night out of curiosity more than intent. The result surprises you. The monthly payment on a house in your price range would actually be close to what you're already paying in rent. Close, but not equal, because a mortgage calculator doesn't show you the down payment sitting between you and that number like a locked gate. 20% on a modest home is more than you've saved in your entire adult life combined. You start a separate savings account labeled House Fund. You put $200 into it the first month, proud of yourself in a quiet way nobody sees, then your car needs brakes. $600. The house fund pays for it, because that's what savings accounts actually do. They absorb the emergencies life keeps sending, and the goal you set gets pushed 6 months further away every time something breaks. You attend an open house on a Sunday out of curiosity. The realtor is friendly until she asks your pre-approval status and you don't have one. Her friendliness doesn't disappear, but it changes register. The way service changes when someone realizes you're browsing and not buying, you leave without saying much. You weren't ready to be there, and some part of you knew that walking in. Your landlord raises rent again that spring, this time citing property tax increases, a phrase you can't argue with because you don't own anything to compare it against. You pay it. You always pay it. Paying it is the one part of this equation that never requires negotiation. The third rule, At $1,800 a month, you can see the finish line and still not reach it because the gate in front of it isn't the monthly payment. It's the number required to walk through the door in the first place. Level 4, you finally own something. A small condo, $220,000, a mortgage payment that's actually less than your last apartment's rent. The first night in it, you sit on the floor because the furniture hasn't arrived, and the silence feels different than any silence you've felt before. Nobody can text you about a dishwasher. Nobody can raise this number in March without your say. The walls are yours to paint whatever color survives the winter. You paint one green, on purpose, and you don't think once about repainting it back. A pipe leaks under the sink in the second month. You call a plumber yourself, you pay him yourself, and something in you expects the old feeling, the powerlessness of waiting 9 days for someone else's guy to show up. It doesn't come. The plumber fixes it in an hour, and you write the check without resentment, because this leak, this fix, this cost, belongs entirely to you now, and somehow that changes what it feels like to pay for it. You get a letter from the county about your property assessment. It went up 6% this year. Your mortgage payment stays exactly the same, because you locked the rate the day you signed, and for the first time in your adult life, a number connected to your housing didn't move against you without your permission. Your friend who still rents mentions his building sold again. Third time in 4 years. He doesn't ask how you're doing it. He just goes quiet on the subject the way you used to go quiet around people who owned things. You recognize the silence because you used to be inside it. The fourth rule, at $220,000 owned, the number on your statement finally starts working for you instead of against you, even if slowly, even if you can't feel it happening day to day. Level 5, $350,000, a bigger place, a real yard, 5 years of payments behind you. You check your equity one random Tuesday out of habit more than need, and the number stops you for a second, $80,000. Not cash you're holding, but value that exists now because you existed inside this house for 5 years, paying a mortgage that felt identical to rent the whole time it was happening. The difference was invisible in the moment and undeniable in hindsight. A realtor cold calls you that spring, the kind of call that used to annoy you when you rented, because renters never get these calls. There's nothing to sell them that they haven't already been told they can't afford. She wants to know if you'd consider selling. Someone in the neighborhood is looking. You say no, but you notice something new in how the conversation feels. You're not being sold to anymore, you're being courted. A neighbor's basement floods in a storm that also hits your street. You watch him deal with insurance adjusters and contractors for 3 months, and you realize the version of you at level 1 would have called this bad luck and moved on. The version of you now understands it's a cost of ownership, annoying, expensive, but attached to something that's actually yours, not a landlord's asset you're maintaining for free. Your mortgage payment, adjusted for 5 years of small raises, now takes 19% of your income. You remember paying 38% in rent for less space, less permanence, less anything. The fifth rule. At $350,000, the house stops being a monthly obligation and starts being the single largest asset most people will ever hold, quietly growing whether you're paying attention to it or not. Level 6, $600,000, paid down, refinanced once at a lower rate, a second property you rent out to someone else now. You understand both sides of the transaction now in a way you didn't expect to. You set the rent increase this year, 3%, not the 6 or 8% your first landlord used to charge you without explanation. You know what that number does to somebody on the other end of it, and the knowing changes how you set it. Your tenant texts you about a dishwasher. You're on the other side of that text now and you respond within the hour because you remember waiting 9 days for a fitting that took 5 minutes to fix. The version of you that used to be ignored doesn't want to become the version of someone else that ignores. You get a call from your accountant about depreciation, a word that meant nothing to you at level 1, where money only ever moved in one direction, out. Now it means the property is quietly lowering your tax bill while simultaneously growing in value. 2 things happening in the same asset that used to feel impossible to imagine sitting inside a single number. Your friend from level 2, the one who still rents, visits for dinner. He looks around the kitchen a little too long. He doesn't say anything about it, and you don't bring it up either, because you remember exactly what that silence used to feel like from the other chair. The 6th rule. At $600,000 across 2 properties, you're not paying for shelter anymore. Shelter is paying you, quietly, in the background, whether you think about it or not. Level 7. $1.2 million. A paid-off primary home, 3 rental units, a portfolio instead of a single address. You don't check listings out of longing anymore. You check them out of strategy, the same lunch break habit from a decade ago, except now the number moving further away belongs to someone else's search. Property managers call you now, not to sell you something, to manage something you already own. The tone is different, deferential in a way you notice slowly over years without naming it. You're not being screened for pre-approval status at open houses, you're the one deciding who gets approved. A tenant falls behind on rent. 2 months. A situation that would have terrified you at level 1, the fear of being the person who can't pay. Now you feel something closer to logistics than fear, a problem to solve with paperwork and patience, not a crisis that threatens your ability to stay housed, because your housing was never dependent on any one payment coming in on time. You sit on your paid-off porch on a Sunday and think about the room from level 1, the green wall you painted back to white on your knees. You don't feel superior remembering it. You feel something quieter, closer to understanding, that the whole system was never about the walls. It was about who gets to decide what happens to them. The seventh rule. At $1.2 million spread across paid-off and rented property, the trap you spent years living inside becomes the structure other people now live inside of. And the view depends entirely on which side of the lease you're standing on. Somewhere right now, someone is rearranging their whole Thursday around a 4-hour window because a landlord's key opens a door that isn't theirs. They're mopping water into a bucket under a sink that isn't broken because of anything they did, waiting on a guy who isn't coming today either. They think this is just what renting costs. It's not the cost, it's the design. The system was never confused about who it serves. It serves whoever's name is on the deed, and it always has.